Oh my God.
Now,
Wait, Jordan Peterson released a video called The Truth About Communism. Oh God, I have to watch it. I have to. I have to. I I have to watch this video of Jordan Peterson telling me the truth about communism. Well, you see, communism is when Miss Piggy makes me clean my room. No unjust hierarchies. I need to not. It's when you don't shower.
Nietzsche said back in the late 1800s that after he said that God was dead,
Probability.
and I suppose that would also mean the theory
Probability. Shira's still working on some stuff with that.
of suffering that I outlined at the beginning that is at the basis of Judeo-Christian civilization, that God was dead and that people had killed him and that we'd never find enough water to wash away the blood. It's a paraphrase, but I've got the basic message right. And he also said there'll be two consequences of that: nihilism, because there's no transcendent meaning, and a move to totalitarianism because people can't tolerate nihilism. And he said the most likely pathway to totalitarianism would be communism, essentially. He didn't quite use those words, but he meant that. The words are close enough. He said socialism, but I'm going to use communism
this is old
to
JP.
distinguish it from democratic socialism. And he said that probably tens of millions of people would die in the 20th century as we played out that experiment. And then he said, but it might be worth it if we learn something from it. Rough, man. I mean, and unbelievable.
Wait, maybe it's
I
new.
cannot figure out how in the
Wait, this is from July 6th. Wait, this might be new. Is this old?
world he knew that that was going to happen, especially so far in advance. But Dostoevsky knew the
How can he ever talk bad about communism when Zizek literally wadded him up and spit him out? Like, Zizek shit down his throat. How could you ever say anything? Zizek made you just look so dumb.
same thing. He wrote this book called The Devils, or The Possessed. You could read that. That's a great book.
1 kajillion people died because of communism.
It takes about 150 pages to get going. But once it like everything snaps together after that, you know, and then it moves. And it's basically his prophecy about... It's
His hair is so thin. Okay,
examination of the kind of person who had arisen in the aftermath of the death of God in Russia, who would lead the communist revolution. That's essentially it. It's brilliant. It's terrifying. And it's a great intro to Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, which describes what did happen when those sort of people took over the revolution. So let's look at what happened after the revolution.
It's from 4 years ago?
And
okay.
we might say, well, how about we replicate the experiment a few times? Because you know how it is. If you're running a scientific experiment, you want to find out what something does if you allow it to behave. You don't want to just run it once because... well, maybe there was something specific about those conditions.
I wonder if he'll choose to ignore State and Revolution from Lenin, right? Where Lenin talks about how revolutions function, the plight of revolution, and the historical importance of revolution, and how revolutions led to where the USSR was going. Or about how Lenin literally wrote that, like, there is theory, Marxist theory in practice, and Marxist theory in books, right? Or how you write about it. It exists in two ways. There is that which is ideal and that which happens, because the world functions much differently in text than it does in reality. But I doubt he's ever read it, considering he never read the Communist Manifesto even. He has not read even the Communist Manifesto. Zizek fucking schooled him on that. So we can almost guarantee he has never read State and Revolution, because he's about to spout some bullshit about how the revolutions don't work or whatever, when State and Revolution was literally Lenin using revolutions as a historical like guidepost and writing and doing analysis of them.
That led to the outcome. You want to generalize it across multiple circumstances. So we might say, well, let's take this set of ideas and let's run it on a large scale over a very long period of time in a variety of exceptionally diverse cultures and languages. So let's do that. Okay, well, we could first start with the Soviets. People even now, because it's like the 100th anniversary of the Russian Revolution, are celebrating Lenin. It's like, that's not good. That's
Why? Lenin was good. The person who collapsed the USSR, I mean, led the USSR thing, was the undoing of Lenin's policies. The undoing of Lenin's policies is what sunk the USSR. And that's agreed upon by everyone. Everyone. Even capitalists agree that the undoing of the USSR came with the end of Stalin and Gorbachev, right? They truly are the reason that the USSR unwound. And Gorbachev was kind of, I mean, they maybe could have held together, but U.S. insurgencies were a giant, giant part of it. The being cut off from the U.S. and the Western world is a massive part of it.
It's like celebrating Hitler. Okay, I'm dead serious.
What? Bro, Lenin didn't persecute an entire group of people. Unless you consider the people who were killing other people by starving them, the capitalists and the fucking the leaders, the oligarchy. Wow, brother, what?
Serious about that.
Bro, this is like killing your oppressors. This would be more like I don't know. This is like being on the people who are oppressed by the Nazis and killing the Nazis, which the USSR did, killed lots of fucking Nazis, and then being like, yeah, but bro, they killed the Nazis. They're kind of fucked up. They did a bad thing. They killed people. Yeah, bro, they killed Nazis.
It's not good. And the fact that people can dare to think that that's okay.
Yeah, this is literally being pro-slave master in the Haitian revolt, being like, wow, I can't believe those Haitian people during the revolution killed their slave masters. It's kind of fucked up that they murdered them. It's kind of fucked up, Sweaty. I can't believe that they would murder them for being their slave master, right? Because that's what Lenin did.
Means that there's something wrong with the way that we look at history. Lenin was a monster. And if you want to know about that, you can read Solzhenitsyn's writings about Lenin. Because the communist apologists...
This one dude. You can read this one dude instead of, I don't know, the thousands of historical documentation about how Lenin literally ushered in probably one of the most revolutionary things in the world. Exploded, took Russia from fields and feudalism to modern society with his guidings. Single-handedly took a country that was not advanced, was people just farmers, fields of nothing, and industrialized it, and literally made it a powerhouse. Life expectancy just exploded.
Just say, well, it wasn't Lenin. Lenin was a good guy. He was all motivated
Yeah, read
by
everyone except for Lenin, actually.
love of the working class. It's like, well, his henchman was Stalin. And if your henchman is Stalin, you're not a good guy. and Lenin was around during the early collectivization. And if you read what he wrote, you'll find out that he was perfectly willing to have any...
Also, early Stalin, bro. Early Stalin... Okay. Stalin did some bad shit later on in life. But if you were to just focus on early Stalin, I guarantee even most conservatives would be like, wow, bro, he's so cool. Because he was fucking Robin Hood. Okay? He's unironically the story of Robin Hood. He would break into banks, rob banks, and then give the money away. Okay? Because he thought the banks were unjust. He literally robbed from banks. Bro, he was fucking doing crazy shit. Not that I don't know if he actually gave it away, but he was robbing banks to take away from the capitalists because he believed they have too much power. Okay?
Number of people die as long as his ideological system could be brought into being. So there's no celebrating Lenin. There's no we're cool, young, Marxist, hip revolutionaries, and he's our idol. It's like...
I mean, most Marxists celebrate the writings and the theory that Lenin put forward.
There's none of that. Not if you know anything. Not if you're decent. Well, there was the death of the kulaks. I told you about that. There was the Ukrainian famine.
Yeah, who were the kulaks? Jordan, are you not going to mention who the kulaks were? Are you just going to gloss over the fact that kulaks were the field owners and the landlords who, guess what, allowed people to starve by withholding food and stuff? They would have an excess of food and they would store the grain instead of feeding people and kill them, starve them. If you didn't pay rent, you died.
And that's 6 million gone there. There was the rise of the gulag.
Apparently, so Stalin only robbed one bank, as far as I know, and it was specifically so that they could fund their party and its revolutionary actions.
State, because it turned out that Russia, the Soviet Union.
Also, there is zero scientific evidence that supports that the famine in Ukraine, the Holodomor, was facilitated by the USSR, meaning it was not state created. It was not man-made, except, right, the man-made aspects of it were because the kulaks, which we just mentioned, were burning fucking fields in an already famine. It was already a drought year, one of the lowest ever recorded harvest in all of Europe. Okay, they burned the fields, the kulaks, to then turn the people of the Ukraine back then, the Ukraine onto the USSR, make them turn, right? Because the best way to allow private industry to seem better is to make the public option seem worse. This has happened throughout history. This is observed time and time again. We can look at the national healthcare system in the UK. As private industry arose, their whole thing was to defund or make or give the shittiest options to the national healthcare system. It is truly the job of private industry to make the public sector look bad. So the kulaks did that, right?
Couldn't run on the principles that it had.
Anyways, the Holodomor is a conspiracy theory that was created by fascist and nationalist with the whole intended purpose. The name Holodomor is literally meant to sound like Holocaust, purely because there's meant to be an association there. But there's no scholarly consensus that the Holodomor was facilitated by the Soviet government. Okay?
That it had laid down as sacrosanct. They just didn't work, so you had to enslave everybody and run your economy as a slave state, essentially, and try not to kill the people in the gulags so fast that you can't suck some productive labor out of them. There's the death of tens of millions of people. We don't even know. The estimates range from 15 to 60 million. And we won't get too picky about the numbers, because after the first 10 million, you kind of made your point. And the fact that we don't know between...
We do know how many Ukrainians died. 8 million. 8 million Ukrainians died fighting Nazis. Okay? And we count that towards the death of socialism or deaths attributed to communism. But that's not true. We just add it, bro. That's like saying... including all the Nazis that died in the Holocaust, right? That'd be like saying, oh man, look at all the Nazis that died in the Holocaust, and just adding that to the number, you know?
15 and 60 is actually an indication of the horror of it, because our count is off by tens of millions, and that's only within the
How many people does the U.S. or any neoliberal society or Western society starve all over the world because they can't afford food, even though we create enough excess in America alone to feed the entire continent of Africa along with ourselves?
last century. And then there was the 1956 crackdown on Hungary and the 1968 invasion of Czechoslovakia. Then there was the whole thermonuclear Holocaust thing that was going on at the same time, and the fact that in 1962 and in 1984 we were seconds away from complete annihilation, right? During the Cuban Missile Crisis, the keys were in the intercontinental ballistic missile release systems, and Castro, as he admitted to Jimmy Carter, in case any of you are Castro fans, which you shouldn't be, that he was perfectly willing to have Cuba annihilated if it would have meant the defeat of the United States.
Okay.
And then in 1984, approximately, I may have the
George Orwell.
date exactly wrong, the Russians received...
You know what else the Russians received? This top of the hour ad break. 3 minutes. I'm sorry, chat. When someone asks you what is a man, what is a man? Being a man is fireworks on the 5th of July, because freedom isn't one day a year for you, so you drive an F-150 under the crumbling infrastructure of your capitalist failed state. And smile, because you know profits were high that quarter. So you grill in peace knowing the meritocracy is indeed intact. There you go. I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay.
Received an indication from their early warning systems that the Americans had launched 5 thermonuclear missiles, and one Russian decided that it was a mistake and refused to launch the retaliation. And he just died about 2 weeks ago. So, you know, that was pretty close. And
Yeah, I saw that, Cleric.
so that was experiment number 1, let's say. That wasn't good, that experiment.
How was that an what, bro? How you just what?
Let's put it that way. It wasn't good. It was exactly the antithesis of good. It was precisely the antithesis of good.
Just because you say it doesn't make it true, Jordan. Just because you keep saying it doesn't make it true.
And all, I mean, there's the People's Republic of China. That's a different country. Like, seriously, a different country, right? Different tradition, different language.
He's about to say some xenophobic shit. I guarantee Jordan Peterson has not fucking looked into China at all from anything outside of a Western source. Which don't, you know, definitely don't have any reason to make China look bad, right? No Western source has a reason to make China look bad, right? Of course not. China making active steps left. Like, there's no reason a Western source would want to make China look bad. No reason at all.
How many people died in China under Mao? No one knows.
A lot of landlords. That's what I'll say. A lot of fucking landlords died under Mao. That's what I'll say.
Same issue with the Soviet Union, although Mao was a bigger monster than Stalin, and that's impressive, you know, because there's Hitler, there's Stalin, and there's Mao. And of the 3, Mao was probably the worst. He's still revered in China.
Oh, Mao worse than Hitler? Oh my God, really? Bro, did you not know what happened after Mao killed all those landlords, Jordan? Are we going to take the next step? He deleted a private property and gave it's called the Great Leap Forward. Yeah, it sucks. A lot of people died. Not a good thing. Probably could have gone about it another way, right? But it ended up putting China to where it is now, where it rivals America. Okay? Also, let's not look at all the atrocities America did when we killed easily more people than that. The genocides America has facilitated, and currently in Yemen, Afghanistan. Let's go to the genocide of the natives. The current genocide of the natives that still happens, in cultural genocide, still occurring to this day. Supreme Court just literally overturned sovereignty of Native American tribe. The attack on Black Americans, always genocide of Black Americans, the eugenics movement that inspired the Nazis. This is all under a capitalistic country. The slave trade, there is an infinite number of things you can attest that America did purely because they could, not because it brought them forward or anything, but out of fascist ideals. Mao's idea, Mao did some fucked up shit, killed probably a bunch of people who were also innocent. But Mao's idea was to get rid of the people that had oppressed his people. He was killing the oppressors. There's an argument to be made that if America had clapped the slave owners, that the systemic racism that plagues our country would not exist nearly to the scale that it exists today. That if we had just decided to Houdini them, the slave owners and the plantation owners, that we probably wouldn't be faced with the same cancer that is systemic racism that exists today. The civil rights movement would have been 1,000 times more successful. Yeah, Mao mismanaged resources while Hitler systemically tried to erase the Jews and other people in a eugenics movement. Mao was not doing eugenics.
China.
Mao was doing some class consolidation, we'll call it. Yeah, bad. Lots of people died. Not endorsing Mao, but to put them even on the same level is fucking bonkers. I will allow Stalin in his later life to be somewhat equated to Hitler in some sense, because Stalin later in his life went very crazy, had a very big paranoid streak, and killed probably way more innocent people than deserved at all, right? I don't think any innocent people deserve to die, but my point is that a lot of people died that shouldn't have, of course. Like, and he did bad things under the idea that like the capitalists were out to get him. I have one piece. That's really good.
Maybe that accounts for their affinity for North Korea, which could still destroy us.
Okay. By the way, how does Jordan Peterson not come to the conclusion, wow, a lot of people in China still look up to Mao and what Mao did as a necessary evil or a necessary thing to put them into the future, right? Why does he think they might not have some reasoning for that is rooted in reality or in goodness, right? Why can he not assume that? He just has to assume that puts the assumption that every Chinese person is evil, right? The assumption is, the next logical step is, wow, if Chinese people cumulatively look up to Mao, wow, Chinese people must be evil, right? Because you notice in Germany, Germans don't look up to fucking Hitler, okay? And haven't since the end of it. Most of them are ashamed, right? The comparison there is just, it blows my mind. It just complete disregard.
Which could still destroy us all. The remnants of that horror.
Yeah, Americans look up to slave owners to some extent, right? But still not only, right? I think even conservatives in America are pretty ashamed of slavery. They look up to the Confederacy because they're lied to because of our system, right? I do think that China probably lies too as well. Of course, that's the function of a State Department. So
horrible state. Maybe 100 million people died in China during the Great Leap Forward. That's a hell of a leap forward. Well, maybe it wasn't 100 million, you know, maybe it was only 40 million. But as I said before, when you're counting in the tens of millions, your point's already made. And then there was Cambodia and the killing fields, and Bulgaria and East Germany and Romania and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, that's North Korea, and Vietnam and Ethiopia, Hungary, etc., etc., etc. It was never a successful
hungry
communist state. Cuba, I suppose, came closest, but it was radically... the Soviets poured money into Cuba, so that doesn't really count.
What?
So then the first question was, well...
And we can attribute... Don't look at the places where America has facilitated genocide then. Holy shit.
Wake up.
Yo, Gremlo, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you,
Gremlo rated
Gremlo.
with 86 viewers.
If you guys don't know, check out Gremlo in the morning. Gremlo streams before I do. Way earlier. Check out Gremlo for sure. Yo, Gremlo, I'm happy to see your stream is doing really well now, man.
Gremlo hosted with
I remember when
81
Gremlo
viewers.
was a 16 viewer Andy for a long time.
Are these Marxists motivated by love or hatred?
To say anything other than love would be disingenuous. I mean, no, that's a lie. No, that's a lie. Marxists are probably motivated by both, right? As a Marxist, I have a hatred for those that take advantage of most people. Okay? I have a hatred for those who value themselves over others. But I have a love for those around me, if that makes sense. I love the community, and I love workers, and I want people, the proletariat, right?
Well, is it love or hatred that produces 100 million dead people?
It's capitalism. That's what produces 100 million dead people. Most of the deaths under communism we can probably attribute to either paranoia driven by the West insurgencies into communist or socialist countries, or by the cutoff and embargoes placed on countries that are socialist or communist. If you even want to use the $100 million, I'm going to accredit that directly to capitalism wanting to cut off these countries from the rest of the world. Okay? Fuck it, 100 million? Yeah, they did it because of capitalism. They're getting rid of them.
And is that enough evidence or not? And if it's not enough evidence, if you think to yourself, well, that's not enough evidence, it was never really given its proper try. It's like, well, what would have been a proper try? See, I always think when I hear someone say that, I know what you think. You think in your delusional arrogance that you understand the Marxist doctrines better than anyone else ever has, and that if you were the one implementing those doctrines, you would have ushered in the utopia.
No Marxist thinks this. That no one. Well, that's a lie. I think that's a very flawed, like, I'm new to being a Marxist or a leftist idea of I'm the most left, but you usually shake that pretty early on, right? Most Marxists agree that the only way to do something is together. Everyone has their idea of utopia, but no one expects to bring in utopia because we live within reality. Oh. No one expects to bring in utopia because we live within reality. Fucking shit, I gotta re-say what I say because I don't want the TTS to interrupt it. No one who is a leftist or a Marxist or whatever expects utopia to exist, and that is a core fundamental. We talk about it. Marx talks about it. Lenin talks about it. They all talk about it. And we understand the only people that can usher in a better world is the workers, not a person. No one believes that their ideas are better. They believe that the ideas of many is better than the ideas of one. There is no individualism.
That's what you mean when you say that. And, you know, they say, and there's an idea in the New Testament that there's a sin.
Why do you have to keep bringing this back to God, bro? You want to talk about deaths?
Sin against the Holy Ghost. If you commit that sin, no one really knows what it is.
No gods, no masters, because the only thing gods and masters do is bring death in the name of something bullshit.
That you can't be forgiven. And I would say, well, if you want a candidate for the sin against the Holy Ghost in the 21st century, the statement, real communism was never tried, with the underlying idea that if you had been the person implementing it, it would have worked.
Not the idea.
I think that's a...
Real communism has never been tried because it's utopian. Socialism is a transitionary state towards communism. If you've read fucking anything, if you'd read literally just one book, Jordan Peterson, you're a fucking doctor, bro. Read one book. Everyone knows.
Pretty good contender for something for which you should never be forgiven.
Jordan Peterson is the worst. Jordan Peterson just has a fundamental misunderstanding of what Marxist is because he has to shape it to his idea to radicalize the already reactionary fucking weirdos that follow him. If it isn't being a fucking transphobe, it's being a disingenuous, bad faith talking head. If anybody just like wants to watch Jordan Peterson get shit on, just watch him talk to Zizek. And Zizek literally is at a loss for words half the time because of how fucking stupid he is. Holy shit.
You need a countervailing set of propositions that you can act out and embody to endow that limitation with worth. And that's not a trivial problem. I was just debating, not really, Slavoj Žižek about a week ago, and
yeah, it wasn't a debate on your side because Zizek was blown away by how fucking stupid you are, and yet you consider yourself an academic.
2 weeks ago maybe, and I was debating him because he had been advertised to me and many others as sort of the world's foremost Marxist scholar, and it turned out
I would love to see Jordan Peterson talk to Noam Chomsky. God. Well, that would be a week-long debate, but
that he really was not much of a Marxist at all. And so I ended up criticizing the Communist Manifesto, which deserves criticism. And
guess what? Guess who criticized the Communist Manifesto? Fellow Marxist, okay? And their criticisms weren't that it wasn't possible, but that it might have not gone far enough, or that it might have, like, the criticisms of the Communist Manifesto are nothing negative. They're purely just like, I'm the most left type bullshit.
And then I expected him to defend.
It's actually considered, the Communist Manifesto is considered like one of the most like the best things ever for workers, right? Isn't the Communist Manifesto could be directly linked back to like the biggest worker movements in the world? Like the first big worker movement was because the Communist Manifesto existed. Like you can, like it did more for the average person than any piece of literature probably ever.
But he didn't, and so that was sort of interesting but nonplussing.
Yeah, the criticisms of the Communist Manifesto were it wasn't long enough and it didn't explain enough jokes.
But he said something very interesting during that debate, and it came all of a sudden, it came out of the blue, you know, and I think it was the most striking part of the entire discussion. And this is just a strange segue, but I need to discuss this because it struck me so hard and because I think it's such an important point. I'd never thought about it before. So he told me something I'd never thought about before at all. He was talking about the Christian passion. And he said that his sense was that the most important part of it was the scene, let's say, where Christ is crucified and cries out to God.
Who goes to this event? Incels.
That he's been forsaken. And he said, look, you got to think about what that means. I'm paraphrasing him. He said that
Fucking incels.
the suffering that characterizes individual human life is so intense that even if God himself deigns to undergo it, it will test his faith to the point where he will not believe in his own existence. And that's really something. And I thought, wow, that's such a brilliant observation, is that because it's definitely the case, you know, if you interact with people in any manner that's the least bit.
God, he's so fucking boring, bro. He just never says anything. He's just like, and then your wife leaves you. And that's because you weren't masculine enough. Have you considered the death of masculinity is tied directly to the idea of Marxism?